Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a bit of a strange one. I'm just going to be talking to the camera because some of you probably don't know that I have a kidney transplant. There you are, that's the spoiler out the way. Yeah, and like that on the surface just like probably doesn't mean much to most people. And the whole reason I'm making these videos was really sparked by the pandemic that's happening at the moment, and the fact that for the first time in many years I'm really aware of my condition, and I'm not normally, like obviously I'm always aware of it because I have to take medication every day, and when I travel and stuff like that, it's, you know, it has to be considered, but I've never felt vulnerable because of my condition, and this whole thing has made me feel like Superman with Krypton being waved at him outside of the window by someone. That's actually a really good analogy of what it feels like, you know. And I'm kind of fed up with hearing, oh yeah, but you know, what we have to remember is that most people will be fine. Most people like will just have a cold. So, you know, so basically it's fine because most people will be fine. But what about the other people? that's what kind of we're saying. We're saying, hang on a minute, you can't just write us off. We're not like just, you know, like decrepit people that are about to sort of like drop off the face of the earth anyway. We're actually, we're a whole range of people that are young and old and fit and healthy, and maybe some that are not so, but everyone has fight in them and everyone wants to survive this thing and live their life the best they can. So I just thought it was a relevant time to talk about, well, who are these people who are at risk? I can only speak for myself because it's me, obviously. And I just thought I'd tell my story because there'll be people out there who are like, what is someone who has an organ transplant? Like, what is that like? And so maybe I'm an average of the whole thing. I don't know, like probably not, but I can at least give some insight. Sorry, I'm rambling now. I started getting migraines, really bad migraines, and I didn't think much of it. At the time, my friends were all saying to me, like, come on, and my family, they were saying, you've got to go and see a doctor and get this looked at. And I thought, no, I don't need to go to a doctor. This is not anything. But they twisted my arm and I went. So I go and have a urine test, a blood test, and I leave the doctors and I don't think anything else of it. That was the end of it. Case closed. So 2 weeks later, and it was actually 2 weeks, it wasn't the same week. And I don't know why it takes so long, but maybe things are different now. But 2 weeks later, I'm on my break at work and I've just turned my phone on because I didn't have my phone on me. And suddenly, ding, 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 I have about 15 messages and voicemails on my phone, and I'm thinking, what on earth is this? What is this? Who can be contacting me so urgently? Like, have I won the lottery or something? And I listened to my voicemail, and it was a series of voicemails that I'd got from the Royal Free Hospital in London, and they basically called me and said, you need to come to hospital now. Like in the next few hours, today, like now. So I was like, wow, okay, that's strange. Wasn't expecting that at all. So the first thing I did, I called my mum, and she was really supportive, and she just said, right, just drop everything, go straight there, I'll get in the car and I will drive over and I will meet you there, and we'll just, whatever it is, we'll sort it out. So I cancelled the rest of my day at work, and I cancelled, you know, my afternoon shift. And of course my bosses at the time were like, yeah, you have to go, just go. So I went over to the Royal Free, and yeah, they basically just told me, you have acute kidney failure. And I was like, what, sorry? Now, this wasn't a massive surprise to me because my mum actually has acute renal failure. Renal, kidney, they're the same thing, just for anyone who's not sure. and it's nephrology when we're talking about doctors that specialise in renal or kidney stuff. They're nephrologists. So yeah, my mum has a history of that. She actually has 2 transplants. So I just thought, well, you know, I've got the same thing. Clearly, that's what happened. So I wasn't too worried because I'd grown up since being, you know, a tiny kid with my mum having hospital visits and leading a pretty normal life. Like, there wasn't anything strange. We went on holiday all the time, every year. We did all the things that a normal family would do. There was nothing strange or untoward. We didn't have to, my mum didn't have to go and spend lots of time in hospital. That never happened. We just had a really normal life. And so I just thought, well, okay, I've got kidney failure, but it hasn't stopped my mum being happy and living her life, so it's not going to stop me. And that was my first feeling on it. And I'm really lucky in some ways that I have a parent that has it as well, because I didn't have any preconceptions of what that would mean going forward. I didn't have any ideas about how my life was going to get drastically bad or something like that. That simply isn't true. So I was really lucky, and yeah, I just I then had to stay in hospital for 3 weeks, I think it was, I can't remember, 2 or 3, and they basically cleansed all of my blood, but they had to do that with medication because they couldn't do that with dialysis, because you have to have lines put in and all this sort of stuff, and it's a longer process. So initially I just had all my levels kind of balanced out with medication and lots of saline and all that kind of thing. And it was pretty grueling going through all of that. And, you know, over that period of a few weeks, I was starting to learn about all the things that were gonna have to happen coming up. So I started to get a bit nervous. And yeah, I was still kind of in that positive mindset, but when you start to hear doctors tell you that you're going to have an operation, you have to choose where do you want the line for your dialysis? Do you want it on your arm? Do you want it on your neck? Do you want peritoneal dialysis, or do you want hemodialysis? So suddenly I was like thrust into this situation where I had to make all of these kind of life-changing decisions, and I was 20. No, was I 20? No, I was 21. I was 21. So, you know, quite young, really. And yeah, so I went through all of that. I said that I want to have hemodialysis because I don't want to have a tube sticking out of my stomach all the time. I'm a young guy, and like that for me was just a kind of no. And there's basically 2 types of dialysis. There's hemodialysis, which is essentially you have these big needles that go into your arm, or I think your neck, or I think now you can have it done under your arm. There's different sites they can do it. And they're basically taking your blood out, and then they're pumping it around a machine through this amazing miracle filter thing. And then they're replacing nutrients into your blood that are lost, and they're taking toxins out of your blood through the process of osmosis. That's basically how it works. If you remember osmosis from science at school, that's how it basically works. You basically create like a balance, and then if you drop the levels of one thing on one side, they flow from the side of higher concentration into the other side. So basically that's kind of what you do. So you put pure water around your blood in this filter, and you pump it full of things that you're missing in your blood, and then they flow into your blood. And then because it's a pure fluid, the toxins in your blood then flow out, and they flow into the dilate. I think it's called dilate, yeah. So that's essentially hemodialysis, and it normally runs for around 5 or 6 hours. Now, I mean, I don't know now. This is like 17 years ago I had it. Wow, can't believe I'm saying that. 17 years ago. So 17 years ago, I was doing it for 5 or 6 hours every other day. So, you know, it could have been worse, but it was still quite time consuming. But yeah, so that's hemodialysis. And then the other dialysis is peritoneal dialysis, and that is essentially they do an operation on your abdomen, and you have this this site where they can plug in, you plug in bags of fluid essentially. And like, by all means, if anyone here who has had peritoneal dialysis wants to correct me on anything, please do so, because I have never done it. I don't know anything about it other than what I was originally told, so I could be missing something majorly important out, or I could be wrong. But yeah, essentially you're using your own vascular system as the filter. So you're pumping fluid into your abdomen, into your abdominal cavity, and then your tiny little capillaries and your blood vessels inside your abdomen that around all of your organs and just in your abdomen, they act like the filter. So the toxins then flow out of your capillaries and into the liquid that's in your cavity, and then you pump it back out, and all of the toxins come back out with the dilate. So that's essentially how it works. So it's actually the same process, the way it works, but it's just two different methods of administering it. You can either do it in your body or you can do it in a machine, and I chose a machine. Anyway, sorry, I've gone like really sort of far into detail that I wasn't planning on doing, but maybe some people will find that interesting. So where was I? So yeah, I opted for hemodialysis. Now I had to then have an operation on my arm. So on my arm, I don't know if you can see this. I'm not sure if this is going to show, but I have here, you can kind of see, it's probably going to make my focus go weird, but I don't know, I'm not going to move my lens, but I'll show you a close-up. But I have a site on my wrist which is called a fistula, and basically what it does, your blood in your arm comes down your, please can I get this the right way around? It either goes down your artery and then it goes around all of your fingers. I'm not looking at the lens, sorry. It goes down your artery and then around all your fingers and then back up your arm. And it's in your vein that it goes up. I think that's the right way around. Yes, it is. Yeah, arteries supply and veins return. I'm pretty sure that's right. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, so what happens is it comes down in your artery, goes around all your fingers, and then it basically comes back up. Now, you need to have, with dialysis, you have to have two ginormous needles that go into your arm or into your neck, wherever your site is. I chose to have mine in my arm because I didn't want to have, I think if you have it in your arm, excuse me, if you have it in your arm, you don't have to have, like, they just take the needles out when they're done each time. So you don't have anything physically there. But in your neck, I think you have to have like a thing that's there all the time. And I was just like, no, I want like the cleanest solution that doesn't leave me with any medical paraphernalia on my body. I'm 21 years old. I'm not allowing this to stop me partying and being normal. So that's why I went for arm. Anyway, so the fistula, right? So what they do, they essentially do a bridge here between your artery and your vein, like that. And then what happens is a lot of your blood doesn't then go down to your fingers. It goes straight back. And the reason they do that is because your artery, which supplies blood, is quite thick, and it's sort of thick enough to accept the needles. They're kind of like, imagine knitting needles, it's like that. But the vein that's returning, I don't know why, because like surely all your blood has to go down and come back. It doesn't like stay there or escape. So I don't really understand why, but your vein's not as thick as your artery. So they have to make it wider to accept the needles. So you have this bridge built, and then what it does, it makes the pressure in your vein higher, like it, I think, no, that's what it is. Yeah, it loses pressure as it goes around all of the tiny little capillaries. So they send it straight round, and then that transfers that pressure straight into your vein. So then when you've got your vein under pressure over a period of time, that kind of expands to kind of like take up the pressure, because they're quite sort of stretchy veins. Sorry if this is grossing anyone out. It's probably grossing me out, actually. It's been a while since I talked about this stuff. Yeah, so I'm going into so much detail here. I don't know why. I'm really sorry if this is boring you. Just turn off. So fistula. So then you have to wait a while for that to mature. Now, I can't remember how long that is. I think it's 3 or 4 months or something. So I had it done pretty much as soon as I was in hospital. I think they did it like in that 2-week period, so that I could have like the quickest time to get onto dialysis, because they said to me, and right, they took my blood pressure in the hospital, and my blood pressure, this is not a lie, this is 100% the truth. My blood pressure was 230 over 118. That is epically high blood pressure. That's kind of like cardiac problem level. That's having an aneurysm level. It was really, really high, and they were saying, sorry, I'm just checking my time. They were saying, yeah, they were like, you're lucky that you didn't have a heart attack, basically, is what they said to me. And ironically, the weekend before, where had I been? Of all the places in the whole of the UK, I had been to Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and I'd been I'd been riding roller coasters the week before, and I probably had that high blood pressure at the same time. And I mean, wow, I was lucky that nothing happened, basically. So that was the hospital bit. Then I left hospital and I was okay, but I was on a very strict diet. So I had to cut out anything that had potassium in it, essentially was like gone from my diet. Because obviously when you're not on dialysis and you have kidney issues, your kidneys basically filter all of the, not just toxins, but chemicals, compounds, anything that your body makes, that basically is in your blood. It's kind of like the bin lorries of your body. So anything that's just like rubbish and not needed, like gets thrown out into the bloodstream. Like the bloodstream is basically the bin lorries going around and getting rid of all the crap. So your kidneys then are like, if you like, the trash processing plant that then sort through all of it and then put it into landfill or burn it or whatever the hell we do to ruin our planet. And then what the kidneys do is they turn it into urea and other byproducts, and then you pee it out, and that's how you get rid of it. And that's why your pee isn't just, you know, like water, it's coloured, because that is those products that make that colour. So I was on a really strict diet. I then started dialysis about 3 months later, I think it was, in like November. So this all happened in the summer. I remember it being the height of summer, and because I remember being outside on my break when I checked my phone, and it was like really sunny and hot. And then I started my dialysis in November, and I was very, 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 very nervous about it, because, and this is kind of why I wanted to talk about this video. I had like seen people on dialysis. I had seen sick people in hospital on dialysis in pictures, because I'd obviously done research and looked it up before I did it. I didn't just like go to the hospital one day not knowing anything about it. Of course, I did some research, and I got really nervous and really worried about it. And I had this preconception that I didn't want to be one of those people. I was like a 21-year-old guy, and I had my whole life ahead of me, and I was thinking, I don't want to be that sick person. I don't want to be that person with an illness. I don't want to be that person with a condition who then has to deal with that for the rest of their life. And so that was the hardest thing to deal with to start with. It was that kind of accepting that my life as I knew it, to some degree, was kind of changing. It was changing. It wasn't over at all, but it was changing. And I would have to consider everything moving forward in a very different way. I started dialysis, and it was actually all right. It was fine. It was really okay. And essentially what you do when you have hemodialysis, they give you some patches that you put on your arm, and what you do, you get this cream that's like a, what's the word? Anesthetic cream, and you have 2 places on your arm. Now, the first time I did this, they had to put a marker pen on my arm, where it was going to happen, because I didn't know. And the only reason I knew after that was because of all the scars, the massive scars on my arm from where all the needles had gone in. and that's how I knew where to put the cream. But the first time they had to actually get a Sharpie and like put a dot and say, right, do your cream there. So that's what I did. And then you put your patch over it, and then like you do that 2 hours before you are due to sort of arrive at your session, and that way the cream has time to work and numb like that area. And it's like, I don't know how it works, but it's amazing. This cream is amazing. Like I wish I had some, because if I ever like did something like cut myself or, you know, I don't know, like hurt myself, I would just probably rub that on and it would just like take away all of the feeling. But it's like, that's probably not a good thing. But anyway, so yeah, I got there and they took them off, and then they put the needles in your arm. And I'm not going to talk any more about that part, because probably loads of people will turn off at this point if I do, because it's pretty gross. But once the needles are in your arm, they basically put some tape over to hold them in place, and it's fine. It's actually really fine. And you just sit there, and yeah, you could, like, I can't remember, like if you got a TV, I think there's a TV on in the ward or something, and I think it was like, I used to have it done in the morning. That was my session was like the morning, because I always then went to work, and I could work. I was lucky enough that where I worked, we did like there were different shifts and stuff, because we're a big art centre in London, so we were open in the evening for concerts and theatre and cinema and stuff. So I was able to just always do a late shift on the day of my dialysis 3 times a week. So I'd get there, they'd do the needles, and then they'd start me, and then I'd sit back, and then This Morning would be on the TV or something. Not This Morning, it would be too early for that. Something, I can't remember, but there was always like something on TV that we'd watch. And I got to know all the patients around me, and there was this really lovely lady next to me called Pat, and she was, she must have been quite old. I can't remember how old she was, but I think she must have been in her early to mid 70s, I would say. And she'd had a transplant, I think, a few years before, but then it had rejected, and she got really ill, and then she had to go back on dialysis, which was like a really big blow to her. But she was hilarious. I think she was from Jamaica, and she was absolutely hilarious. And she used to wind all the nurses up. She used to tell jokes to everyone, and we just thought she was like a ball, and we had such a great time with her there. And that was the thing, right? I'd lost, like, in my mind, some of my independence, and I was having to suddenly be hooked up to this machine every week. But I gained like community, and I know that sounds really weird, but the nurses became my friends, the doctors became my friends, the other patients became my friends, and I just didn't feel like I was alone. I didn't feel like I was alone at any point, and it was just really kind of, it was almost like I sacrificed one thing, but I got something else in return. And that took a lot of my anxiety away, because I felt like I wasn't on my own going through it. And there were always people around. I could just say, I've noticed this happens. Does that happen to you? Like, what do you do about that? And then they'd be like, well, yeah, that can happen. Try that. And so I always had advice from people that had been through it. And I was probably the youngest person there, I think. So yeah. And I did this dialysis for about a year. Yeah, 1 year. And just one other thing I'm going to say, because this is really funny. So just going back to the diet thing. When I had my dialysis, I was allowed to suddenly, like, I was still on a really strict diet, but on the day of, or at the time of dialysis, and I don't really understand this fully, because I would have thought there would be a delay. They basically say you can eat what you want. You can eat and drink what you want while you're on dialysis, because the machine is taking it straight back out. Now, I would have thought that there's a slight delay, because whatever you ingest doesn't go into your blood instantly. But maybe like if a couple of hours before the end of your session, like stop, I don't know. But I was so desperate to eat this stuff that I would just do it straight away. So I was banned from eating chocolate, because it's really high in potassium. I was banned from eating potatoes of all kinds. The only potatoes I could eat was like a couple of boiled potatoes. Like, boiled potatoes, hello, no. I like my roasted potatoes, I like my chips, I like my mash. Anything potato is like king to me. And I couldn't have any of it. So 2 massive things, crisps and chocolate. and I'm 21 and I can't have crisps and chocolate. So there you go. And then there's like loads of other stuff that have things like tomato is high in potassium. Nuts, I think, have lots of potassium in them. Certain veggies have loads of potassium in, so they're like, you can eat carrots, but you can't eat broccoli or something. I can't remember what it is. It's like, and then I was also on a restriction because of phosphate, so I couldn't eat a lot of dairy. So I wasn't allowed to eat yogurts. I wasn't allowed to eat cheese. I wasn't allowed to eat anything with a sauce that was really like dairy with cream or milk in it. So the restrictions were like huge. So what I used to do, I used to come out of the tube, and so I was living actually at the time in Crystal Palace in South London, and because I was living down there, but I'd moved down there, but when I was admitted first, I was living in North London as a student because I was at Middlesex Uni, so that's why it was such a difference. And so I used to get on the tube really early, go all the way across London every other day, and I'd get off the tube and I'd go straight into Budgeons, which is like a shop for those of you who don't live in the UK, and I would get about 4 packets of crisps, I'd get about 5 chocolate bars, like 5 cans of different drinks, and all this like cheese dipper, like everything you can imagine, all the crap that you're not supposed to eat. I would just get it, and I would literally sit there, and it makes you really hungry as well, dialysis. I don't know if anyone else had that, but when I was on dialysis, and maybe it was because it was the morning time and it was breakfast time, and maybe that's why, because it was like when I would be eating breakfast. But I used to get so hungry. So I would get all this food and I would just stuff my face with all this food, and it became like a running joke. And I used to love it. And something I do remember, and you have to be really careful with your salt intake when you're on dialysis. So I loved salt and vinegar crisps. They're my favourite flavour. They're not anymore actually, bizarrely, but they were. And so I used to get these Max salt and vinegar crisps that were you can't get them anymore, but they were so strong, where you would lick it and it would be like the most sour thing you can imagine. And I loved them. So anyway, I would stuff my face, and then that was my dialysis. And then I would finish dialysis around, I don't know what time. It must have been like lunchtime, just after lunch. And then I would get on the tube, and I remember if I did a late shift, I started work at 3, and I remember I had a couple of hours to like get to work. So I must have finished around 1, I think. Yeah. I was quite chilled out when I started work, so it wasn't too bad. Like I coped with it fine. I never complained. I just got on with it, and I kind of grew up with my mum having to always have health issues and constantly be going to the hospital, and she couldn't do a lot of things because she got tired very quickly. She was on very different medication to what I was on and what I am on now, because she had her transplant very early, and the medication was different. It had long-term side effects. So I grew up with her having lots of medical ailments, shall we call them, and she's a fighter, and so that kind of rubbed off on me. And but I was lucky for 2 reasons. I was lucky because, firstly, I live in a country that has an amazing health service. It's a national health service, the NHS, and I had the option of having world-class treatment, and I had excellent doctors, excellent nurses. I was looked after very, very well, and I have to give a massive shout out to the NHS, because all the care that I've ever received has been impeccable, and I just think I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be alive I wouldn't have been born if it wasn't for the NHS, because the NHS saved my mum's life, and then they saved my life. So I owe a lot to the NHS, and I can't speak highly enough of it. And the second reason, and also they're doing an incredible job right now. So don't want to be selfish and just talk about my reasons, but they're amazing in general anyway, and we've all seen that, and there's no denying that they are the real heroes in our society, and I really hope that carries forward, and I think it will. I really think it will, because I think people have had their eyes open to what the realities are. But sorry, going back to me, the second reason that I was really lucky, and I am really lucky, is that I had a transplant after 1 year. I didn't have to wait for years and years and years, and I had one, like full stop, period. Because there are a lot of people who have dialysis who never manage to have a transplant for various reasons. It could be that there's never a match that comes up. It could be that they live in a country where organ donation is not really a thing. Transplantation doesn't happen on the same level as it does in the UK, but also because they may just have they may have other health issues that prevent a transplant from taking. There's lots and lots of complicated reasons why some people just can't have transplants, and I didn't know when I was on dialysis that I would have one. I didn't know, so I kind of went into it thinking, well, I could be on dialysis for the rest of my life, and there's a chance that I might have to go back on it. Like, there's a fairly high chance I'll have to go back on it if my kidney slows down and I have to have another transplant and there's not a match at the time. Who knows what could happen. Yeah, I was lucky for two reasons. I was in a country where I was able to have world-class treatment, and secondly, I was in a country that could give me a transplant, and I had someone that could give me a transplant, and I had the transplant. So I look at the positive side of it and I think, wow, like, I don't even think, oh God, I was in this situation. I just think I was in this situation and everything went really well, and I've come out the other side, and I have an amazing career, amazing friends and family, and I travel around the world. And yes, there are daily things that affect I get tired very quickly. There are certain things I'm not supposed to eat and drink too much of. Nothing's like you can't have any of that. It's definitely not the same as when you're on dialysis. People always say to me, oh, can you drink? Are you allowed to have alcohol? Yes, I am allowed to have alcohol. Renal transplant patients can still usually drink. It doesn't really affect alcohol as such. That's more of a liver thing. But obviously, like, everything in moderation. So I wouldn't be getting hammered all the time as a transplant patient, and people shouldn't be doing that anyway. But yeah, luckily I've never been a big drinker, so it's never been an issue. So that's what happened to me, really. I'd love to share more information with people. Something that's really important to me is, when I went through all of this, I was lucky that I had a role model, which was my mum. And my mum is my best friend in the world, and I know she's probably watching this right now. She's the biggest inspiration to me, my best friend in the whole entire world, and I see her as such a beacon of light, and she's always been that to me. But as I've got older and I've become more mature, as you do as you get older, we've just our relationship and our friendship has grown to such an incredible level. I never thought I could be this close to someone, and so that's anyway. She's always been there for me, and I had that person to look to for advice. I had that person to give me hope. Basically, there are people who get diagnosed with not just renal failure, but other organ failure. And they don't have that necessarily. They don't have those people that can give them guidance and give them hope and make sure that they are doing the right things, and that they don't just have a healthy body, but they also have a healthy mind, because I think that's really important. And for some people, I can imagine that facing the prospect of renal failure and not knowing what's going to happen in the future, that could be quite a dark thing to go through for someone. So I'd love to be there to help anyone out. All I can offer really is information and my story, and give you links to things that might help you find more information and support. But anyone who has any questions, whether you're a renal patient or not, but just comment down below, and I'll answer anything you ask. So I'm going to do, the next video will be about the actual transplant. I'll talk about that, and I'll talk about how that kind of came to fruition, the actual transplant, then recovery, and then the impact on like my everyday life and how it affects me day to day. Anyway, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for staying to the end. Please subscribe, because I'm like crying out for subscribers so I can grow this channel. So if you've watched this and you've watched any of my previous videos, well, you're going to probably watch the next one. So you may as well hit that subscribe button. So just do it, okay? And like this video and hit the bell, and then you'll see the next part come up when I post it. Thanks for watching. Love you guys loads, and I'll catch you soon.